Welcome to VR Hermits, a podcast about virtual reality development. I'm Dave Ramsey.
And I'm Joe Simpson. How's it going, Dave?
Doing really good, Joe. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for this impromptu call. This is not Sunday afternoon when we normally record VR Hermits. This is, in fact, Wednesday afternoon. Just
Midweek
a couple of days.
Update.
Yeah. But I've been doing a lot of thinking the last couple of days and thinking through some changes to my business and wanted to basically talk to a couple of different people, but one of those people is definitely you. And I wanted to kind of have this conversation on the record because it involves the VR portion of my business. And I wanted to kind of strike while the iron's hot and try to get all this out in the open, or at least out of my head, as soon as possible. So thank you for agreeing to an extra episode this week.
Okay. Just to get a little bit of heads up, or at least for everybody else, so this is primarily going to be a non-technical episode?
Pretty much, yeah. This will mostly be about my business and just some of the changes that I want to make that definitely involve VR development in a big way, but nothing particularly technical. Like none of our regular problem solving or talk about why we're stuck or how we're stuck or what we're working on.
Okay. I'm fine with that answer. I just wanted to make sure everybody else was. Let's do it.
Yeah, so maybe I'll mark this as the non-canonical episode.
You've just been dying to do that, haven't you?
Pretty much. Anyway, I guess a quick update that doesn't have anything to do with this topic is I did get the rest of the podcast backlog uploaded to YouTube. So we are all of our episodes are current there, and I'll be publishing on YouTube as well as our regular RSS feed if you care to consume the podcast on YouTube instead of a podcast player. So that's all available now. I don't know if that's helpful, but it was relatively easy.
It is a thing that people do today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these podcasts today. Back in my day, we had RSS feeds.
You still have RSS feeds, Joe.
Yeah, I know.
You just don't write RSS.
Everybody just wants to hide them.
Yes.
All right. So this is kind of a big topic or a series of topics. And feel free to interrupt with questions and comments, concerns. Just kind of be Dave, the friend/consultant along the way. Because a lot of this, I haven't really spent a lot of time clarifying my thinking on this, but I have some pretty big changes to the way I want to do my business from now on. So I guess to start out, that comes from I've had one foot out the door the entire time we've been doing this podcast, and the entire time I've been working in Unity or Unreal Engine. And what I mean by one foot out the door is I've continued to maintain a FileMaker consulting business as my primary income while I try to get up to speed in VR development, game design, Unity, just all of the above. And this FileMaker is not really where I want to spend the rest of my career. I guess it's not the worst thing, but it's just not really what I want to be doing long term. And I have, as I started to run low on cash at the end of last year, I kind of rustled up some more FileMaker business, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more. And every time I do that, that's more time I'm spending away from VR development. And basically I'm continuing to build up an experience and expertise in an environment, in an industry that I just don't intend to stick with. So, one of the big changes that I made at the beginning of the year, I'm not going to take on any new customers. I'm going to handle the customers I have and maybe do some subcontracting or partnerships with other developers. And that's been okay, but it's been a lot of extra work, just kind of managing all the communication, and I have a little bit less control over pricing and scheduling and things like that under that type of workflow. Something that's been going on recently is I've been working with, not really working with, but I was about to work with a local IT company, some friends of mine, on a large FileMaker solution. And that would have been, and I should say, this may still happen. Everything that I'm going to talk about today is assuming that this project isn't going to happen, because everything I've been told so far seems to indicate that it's not going to happen. I did give them until the end of business Friday to make it happen, if they can kind of turn things around. Other than that, I basically said I'm not going to be able to do the project. So we do have about 2 days left in that time frame where that project could still happen under some variation. They've already the client has already turned down our initial quote, and we met the other day to talk about some alternatives, some kind of reduced scale projects, changing the payment plan, things like that. But didn't really want to compromise on price because of the nature of the software, the nature of the customer, and frankly, it's a fair quote. Like, it's not overpriced in the least. So I guess take everything I'm about to say with that. This project may still happen, and at which point I'll have to drastically reconsider all of my drastic reconsiderations.
Mm-hmm.
So assuming that project doesn't happen, which I think is 99% the case at this point, then I need to rustle up some money as quickly as possible. And I don't really want to go and do more FileMaker work. I don't want to start sending out emails, looking for subcontracting jobs. I don't want to take on new customers. I just don't want to go down that road, because I feel like I'm always just going to be spinning my wheels in Unity development when I have something else to fall back on. So what I want to do instead is basically turn myself into a freelance Unity developer / VR developer / consultant as quickly as possible.
Okay.
And this is something that you and I have talked a little bit about, and we even talked about it a couple weeks ago. Like, obviously I need to build up some kind of portfolio to show people what I can do. And that's a big part of the plan I've been working on the last couple of days. But I was thinking, I guess the reason why I've been doing all this thinking this week is I've done kind of an input fast. I do every once in a while whenever I start to feel overwhelmed. I just kind of turn everything off. Like, I don't read anything. I don't listen to any podcasts or watch anything or play any games. I just kind of sit around and think for a couple of days. And that's what I've been doing the last 3 days. And it's good for me to do that from time to time, because I have a tendency to forget that I'm a smart person.
Me too, Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, I've got, I'm 35 years old. I've only realized that I was an intelligent person for about the last 8 years. And I still have this tendency to fall back into this really self-deprecating and just kind of inconfident person of like, I'm just too stupid to get by in this world. And that's kind of how I went through most of my life, and it's not a healthy place to be, and it's not an accurate description of me. I am actually a pretty intelligent person, and the skills that I have are learning rapidly, solving problems, thinking, like doing actual deep thinking, which is what my customers pay me for now. Most of the FileMaker development is incidental. They're paying me to solve their problems. So I'm trying to think of like, how can I turn those things into skills that I can leverage in the VR industry? Well, obviously consulting makes the most sense. They're consulting, freelancing, whatever you want to call it. It's hard for me to build myself as an expert, but at the same time, I am an expert thinker. I'm a deep thinker, and I can pretty much solve anything that I think the VR industry can throw at me from from this side of the development cycle, from those people using Unity, not those people making Unity or making the VR SDKs. I'm not claiming to have that kind of expertise, but I think one of the biggest problems with my lack of progress so far is working on my own projects. I've just become too undisciplined that way. and this is something that we talked about on Massively Unqualified a couple of times, of like when we can gain the most experience by solving other people's problems, but when is it too early to start doing that? And I think I'm well past the point where it's too early. I think I should have been doing that for a couple of months now, instead of just like creating and failing to solve my own problems. Like with the VR movement thing, like I can basically never ship anything that way. I'm just not going to get the experience that I need by just working on my own projects. So a big part of the theme of VR Hermit so far has been the fact that Joe wants to start a products-based company. And I think that's still my ultimate goal, but that goal is going on the back burner for now. And right now I'm going to focus on not dying first and foremost. So doing just enough freelance work to keep not dying on a regular basis. So I don't need to make a huge successful consulting company. I'm not going to hire a team of developers and designers. I'm not going to build that kind of company, but I am going to do what I have to do to maybe do some freelance work on some of those various freelancing websites, talk to as many other developers as possible, and just try to get the experience that I need to be able to make things on my own. So I've got a lot more to say, but before I go on, what do you think so far?
Exactly. So conceptually, I'm not opposed. I mean, I was never really opposed previously, I don't think. Mm-hmm. I am concerned about the ability to turn that into a viable business quickly enough.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, I already know you have a exceptionally reasonable lifestyle, and you're really good at spending under your income.
Mm-hmm.
So that lowers the bar hugely. You know, you don't have 3 kids in private school and, 2 dogs and 2 car payments. You don't even own a car. So all of that makes it much easier to achieve those goals. Yeah, it'll be tough.
Yeah, it'll be basically. My business has about 2 months worth of operating expenses left until it just runs out, and I basically just need to start bringing some cash into those accounts to keep it going. And about every, I don't want to get into the numbers too much, but every $4,000 or so is another month. It's actually a little bit less than that, but that's kind of rounding up for the case of security. But just looking at the times where I did FileMaker consulting full time, I can make, 25 or 30 grand a month. If I can't make $5,000 a month doing Unity freelancing and consulting, then I'm in trouble. Like maybe this just isn't a viable industry for me at all. But I think I can get there pretty quickly. It's not going to happen overnight, and it may take me 6 months to get up to the point where I need to be, but I've got some backup plans to make that possible. I mean, I'm not a fan of debt. I've never been in, or I haven't been in debt in years. I used to be in a lot of debt, and that was a really horrible place to be. But that was all personal debt. That was credit card debt. That was things that I defaulted on in a previous iteration of Joe. So I've always avoided debt in my business, but I'm not against creating some debt for the sake of leverage for this type of project. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it would be hard for me based on my last couple of years of income, and I don't think it would be hard for me to get the money that I need to keep going. That's a last-ditch effort, and I do still, as much as I want to step away from the FileMaker thing, that is always a viable thing. I think I'm a couple of phone calls away from getting subcontracting at any time.
Yeah.
So I want to forget that that's an option right up until the point where that is the only option left. I'm almost I'm almost considering, like, if it really becomes necessary, just getting a part-time job outside of technology entirely. Like, there's a local bookshop that's always hiring. There's a coffee shop that's always hiring. Just something else where I can keep the lights on that has nothing to do with sitting in front of a computer all day. That may be a better idea for me at this point than trying to do more FileMaker work.
Mm-hmm. I will tell you that from previous experience, a job that is not mentally taxing or straining in any way is actually really good for thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At least for a while. I don't know that I'd want to do it for 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, before I got into software development and FileMaker development, I was a cook for several years. I was a kitchen manager at a local restaurant, and I didn't make very much money, but I had like 100% of my thinking time for myself. And during those 3 years is when I read pretty deeply of philosophy and history and kind of turned myself from the low confidence, self-loathing loser that I used to be into the modern person who is able to take on software development as a viable career option. So I'm familiar with that, like going back to, I don't know if cooking would be my first choice,
right?
Just because of, but going back to those types of jobs may not be the worst thing for me for a while. But like I said, these are all worst case scenarios that I don't even have to think about until the end of May. So with that in mind, how about we talk about what I am planning to do and kind of get your feedback on that stuff. So like I mentioned, I'm a smart person, but I need to be reminded of that from time to time. Usually I have a way of reminding myself by doing that kind of input fast that I mentioned of like, I don't know, it's a weird phenomenon where I can kind of get carried away by the number of things on my to-do list and the number of things I want to learn and, the hobbies that I'm cultivating. I can pretty easily allow myself to get to a point where I'm not doing a whole lot of my own thinking, where I'm just kind of responding to things. And when I'm doing that, and then I'm combine that with being stuck on something like that VR movement problem, it's pretty easy for me to fall back into this low confidence position of like, I just suck too much at this. Like, I'm just not good enough to do this. Like, there's no way I can learn C# development. There's no way I can learn Unity. And that's total BS. As soon as I step away from that world for a day, like, my default hobbies are enough to convince me that I'm a smart person. Like, I return to philosophy right away. Like, stupid people don't return to philosophy in their downtime. So it helps to remind myself that I'm not a stupid person. I'm not the stupid person that I sometimes still think I am in my head. And then, like I said, my skills are really learning rapidly, solving problems, and thinking for other people. So with the aim of turning myself into a VR developer / Unity developer, and that's something I wanted to mention, I'm going to focus everything that I do along the VR and AR spectrum, but I have no qualms about just doing other work in Unity, whether it's a 2D or 3D app or a game or more of a productivity thing or pretty much anything. At this point, if it's in Unity, I'll do it. If it's in Unreal Engine, I'll try. If it's in WebVR, I'll definitely do it. Things like that.
I think you'd be in a much better position now to go back to Unreal and pick it up.
Yeah.
Like the language, the terminology, the way of thinking about problems and things like that, I think would go much more smoothly for you or I now. Just starting from zero was a little rough.
Unreal Engine makes a lot of sense in many, many ways. The last time that I tried it in December, there was just weird rendering issues in the latest version for the VR camera rigs. It's like I posted some stuff on the forum, never got any feedback. Dozens of people have posted on that same thread having the same issues. No one from Epic has ever responded to that. As far as I haven't tried in the last couple of weeks, but as far as I know, that issue is still there. Like, I don't know if it actually happens when you build an app and deploy it, but developing it is basically like putting a fuzzy lens over everything. It's just like something is severely wrong. And it was literally just like update Unreal Engine from, I think it was like maybe 4.17 to 4.18, something like that. One of those. It was just an update that just like broke all VR functionality for rendering. It's like, this is not viable. But in terms of workflow, yeah, I don't think it would be, I don't know, it's probably not ideal to try to do both right now. I think Unity is a better fit for me and a better fit for consulting. And I don't know, I just feel like everybody in the VR, like all the big players in the VR, tend to support Unity first and Unreal Engine as soon as they have time. I don't know, it seems like a really good place to stay. So I'm going to keep focusing on those skills. A lot of the things I want to do are directly in Unity, or even doing like web VR things, but doing them in Unity and using the WebGL export process, things like that. So what do I want to do? What do I have to do? First, I need to build a portfolio. And I guess first is maybe not the right term. I need to kind of do all of this at the same time.
Yeah.
But I need to have something publicly available to show people both the outcome of my work and the work itself. So I need to have, Unity projects that people can download and take a look at how I structured the project, how I did the code, what kind of assets I'm using, things like that. But I also need to have a place where people can download builds and try it in VR and see if what I made is fun, if it's, good enough. So I need to start building a portfolio of both developer things and products, and those would be the same thing. So I think I'm going to start with the bowling game I've been playing around with this week. Bowling just seemed like a fun game mechanic to play around with. So I've been doing a little bit of that. I posted some screenshots and YouTube videos the other day. And I don't think this is at all a product that I want to make, but it's just a fun, familiar type of thing to play with that I think anybody can just pick up and play. But I just, I've got tons of different ideas of how to kind of play with the physics and use kind of wonky game mechanics and just do some pretty cool stuff there that I think would be a good portfolio piece. Another thing would be, and I'm kind of shaping these portfolio items into different technologies as well. So I want to do that one with the Steam VR camera rig and just kind of build everything in code myself using like Unity primitives, not really using a whole lot of external assets, maybe some Pro Builder stuff, but I want the code that people can download or the project that they can download to involve like nothing other than Steam VR. Like if I use Pro Builder to make something, I'll do it in a separate project and save the mesh out. So it just comes in as a mesh. I don't want people to have to install a bunch of plugins to audit my work. I also like the idea of maybe a Gravity Wizard demo of just kind of what we talked about on episode 33 of VR Hermits, of giving the VR player a couple of maybe magic wands of some sort to control gravity in different ways. I'm not sure if that's a game. Maybe it's just some really cool stuff to play around with. But I think that would be kind of a fun thing. And I want to do that one with the Steam VR interaction system and kind of use the same mechanics that Valve used with the longbow example, where I forget exactly what they're called, like item packages or something like that, where you basically interact with one of those and they replace your controllers, basically become your hands while you're interacting with them. So having different types of wands that the Gravity Wizard can interact with, and just doing some pretty neat and different things with those. Then I think the bowling game is definitely first. That's what I'm going to start working on right away. I still have a lot of thinking to do about the rest of these. So the bowling game with the camera prefab, the Gravity Wizards with the Steam VR interaction system. I want to do something in Daydream, and I think that may just be like maybe an audio visualization tool. So maybe I don't know if I can play music on the device, but if not, maybe just ship with some stock media music. It would be great if people could select their own music and build a scene that reacts to the music. Just basically like a screensaver in your face. Things like that. The one I'm most excited about is a Windows mixed reality app built in Unity, but with the Windows mixed reality toolkit that Microsoft released. And I want to build a productivity something. And I think that something is just going to be a really basic to-do list that has the functionality that I want in a to-do list, but in a room as opposed to a list in an application. So I want my someday maybe bucket to be a bucket. I want to throw ideas into the bucket. I want to be able to organize things with my hands and, basically drag and drop to the extreme. Mm-hmm. And then ideally I'd want a way for that data to be available in a 2D format, whether that's just another Windows app or maybe I do this entire thing as a web app. It probably won't be a shipping product, but a good proof of concept, something that I can use and show off and people can, make a to-do list and maybe export it or something. And then the other idea is a web VR something. And that could be a series of web comics like we talked about, or I could combine that with the Windows Mixed Reality project, make the entire productivity app in web technology, make the interaction stuff in web VR, and then make that entire web VR app into a UWP app using the techniques that I learned last week. So I could kind of go for two at the same time there. So those are my portfolio ideas. I've got a bunch of other ones, a growing list of game ideas. But really, I wanted to spend time getting as many things out there as possible. So some of these could just be like things I work on for a day or two and publish a download link to. Some of them could be things I work on for weeks at a time. Some of them could turn into projects later on. But for the time being, I'm more interested in just getting stuff out there. Mm-hmm. Stuff that is fun to play with, demonstrates how awesome VR is, demonstrates that I know what I'm doing, and is professional enough on the back end to say, hey, this guy should write code for us, or this guy should make an app for us.
Okay. In the short term, that strikes me as a lot of portfolio pieces.
Yes. I'm really just going to go to work on one of them right away.
Yeah. When I started my business, I had no work that I could hold up as exclusively my own because I'd worked as a team in various capacities on almost every project that I'd worked on prior to that point. So the first thing I did was just whip up a small thing that was tiny and complete that I could pull out at a meeting and show to somebody and say, see, I can actually write code. Mm-hmm. It was clean, but honestly, nobody ever really wanted to look at my code.
Yeah.
It was more a question of, can you do it? And to a large extent, once you can get, there are meetings that you will be able to get if you have a Windows media headset or mixed reality headset portfolio piece. But there are other meetings that you can get where you will be talking about VR and they'll go, let's talk about Windows mixed reality. Mm-hmm. You're just, I've worked with it, and the things that you have to keep in mind are these 4 primary characteristics that are slightly different from other kinds of VR or mobile stuff and whatever, and you just move right past it. So yeah. And honestly, once you've had 2 or 3 even small contracts, those are the things that you talk about,
Yeah, exactly.
not your portfolio pieces.
Yeah. So I think the bowling game is going to be front and center, or the bowling mini game. What I'm envisioning is like 5 or 6 different types of bowling, basically, like a regular, plain old vanilla bowling, and then just like other weird variations of it. And not, sitting there bowling an entire game, but, like just playing with the physics, bowling in a tube, playing with the gravity, bowling with bouncy balls, bowling with a bazooka, all kinds of stuff. Like I think there's a lot of fun there that could be had as just a demo project.
To keep it moving, you could say every time you clear a frame, the rules change.
Yeah, I even thought of like the bazooka bowling thing, where the imagine a sine wave controlling just an up and down, just like a gauge on the bazooka, and that's how much velocity it gets when you shoot. So just wherever that little object is how powerful the shot is. So but it's moving quite fast. So you gotta like time it just right.
What you got to do is pick up that input from the microphone. So the pitch at which you are humming when you fire controls how the ball moves.
Nice.
Sorry.
Nice. So that's kind of the portfolio ideas. I really do, I kind of agree. Like having lots of these ideas to work on is fun. I think having one will be necessary, and then getting some work and using that work as part of the portfolio is probably more how it will go over the long term. Which is why I haven't really thought out any of them besides the bowling mini game.
Right.
So I want to talk about skills development. So I've kind of lumped these into 2 sets of core skills and secondary skills. So core skills are things that I need to get as close as possible to master level really, really quickly. I need to become a really good C# coder like a month ago. And I need to become a pretty fluent Unity developer in the sense of just knowing all of the Unity workflows, figuring out the gotchas, when to use a feature, when not to use a feature, when to fall back on a third-party asset, when not to, things like that. Like I need to know not just how to pop stuff into a scene and attach a script, but how to use Cinemachine and the animation tools, and learn a lot more about lighting and post-processing, those types of things. So C#, Unity development, and marketing and self-promotion, which is some skills that I'm just not that great at, but I need to get good at if I'm going to do pretty much anything in the VR industry. Like, I need to do a better job of getting the podcast out there. I need to do a better job of letting people know that I exist and can solve their problems. And if I ever want to have a products-based company, I need to get better at marketing anyway. And getting better includes being able to hire somebody to do that eventually as well. So it's not just about cultivating the skills, but I don't want to hire somebody to do something that I don't understand. Just like, I wouldn't hire an accountant without knowing a little bit about finances.
Yeah.
So those are the 3 core skills. Obviously, the way that I can get the best at those is by doing stuff. There's a little bit of, I can learn by doing some of the coursework as well, but I'll make more progress doing and learning. So a lot of those portfolio pieces, I want to really leverage like different coding techniques aside from like just attach another script to an object and move on. Like I want to learn some more things in Unity and really leverage as much of that as possible. And then some of the other portfolio pieces could turn into just examples of a specific Unity workflow. So it's something I spend an afternoon on, like, here's how I wanted to learn about Cinemachine. So I made a scene with Gaia, and now it's really beautiful and pretty. And now I want to just make a 3-minute video of 4 different camera angles with maybe some AI animals or flowing rivers, things like that. Like learn that kind of workflow. So some of those little portfolio pieces or demos could just be a result of me spending a day or two or more in various Unity workflows.
That would be an interesting way of thinking of it, as all of the learning activities have as their output effectively a piece of marketing of some kind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like whether it's, hey guys, I found this neat thing. Here's how I did it, which educational stuff can also be helpful
Mm-hmm.
for that kind of purpose, because other developers will see it and like it or spread it around or things like that.
Yeah. And that's something I need to do in the self-promotion category. Is I need to start blogging again and really start blogging those demos and examples as I build them, kind of do a developer blog and a more technical blog, but in a more professional sense than I've done previously. Like, I am an idiot developer and I don't know anything. Here's me not knowing anything today. Like, I need to kind of turn that around and do it the other way. I'm like, hey, I'm a smart person who knows these things. Look what I know.
Have you, I know you habitually unsubscribe from any subscription mailing thing. Have you caught any of the mailings from the guy who did the VR college?
Yes, I just stay on his list. Okay. Jason's.
Yeah, that's a great list.
It is, definitely.
All those little stories. There's an ad at the bottom, but I've never felt like they were there for marketing.
Yeah.
There was just somebody sharing interesting information with me.
Yeah, his list, and not in the VR industry, but Jonathan Stark's mailing list are both really helpful. Jonathan Stark's list is much more about running a business and consulting. Doesn't really have anything to do with any specific technology or any specific business type in general, but he's just really good at running a business and teaching other people how to do that. So I think those two lists and the Ray Wenderlich ones are the only ones that I still am on in any form. So we talked about core skills. So the core skills being C# coding, Unity development, and self-promotion, marketing and self-promotion. So I want to start blogging again. Part of that blogging, I want to do a more technical development blog, but I also thought about doing a second blog, and this could be on the same website, just maybe different RSS feeds. But I thought about doing an aggregator blog as well. So I consume a tremendous amount of media, and one of my skills is being able to consume a ton of content and kind of, I hate to say this word, but synergizing the data. As much as I hate that word, it's the correct word. Uh-huh. But I'm really good at putting the pieces together from a bunch of different sources. And that's how I got really good at FileMaker development in such a short period of time, is I was just all over the place, trying different things, reading different ideas, listening to different podcasts. So I thought about doing not like cultivating a blog for the sake of the blog, but just making a link sharing blog or an aggregator of what is Joe reading, listening to, watching about VR. So basically every time I read an article, hit a button, it gets posted to that. Share all the YouTube videos, the VR podcasts or Unity podcasts out there. As, just kind of a way of I guess on the one hand, keeping myself accountable that I'm not overdoing it with that stuff, but also making sure that other people can find the good stuff. Like I find a couple of aggregators helpful on Twitter, so just trying to provide the same type of thing for other people.
Yeah, well, I've mentioned a couple of times that your Twitter feed has a ton of cool stuff in it. Like it's a constant stream of the best stuff I've seen around.
Yeah, and most of it is not for me. It's just what I'm happen to be reading, things like that. So maybe that just stays on my Twitter feed, or maybe I make a second Twitter account so I can keep my Twitter feed for more Joe and radical app dev stuff.
Or use the Twitter feed as a feeder to the link site.
Yeah. Yeah, so something I'll probably be able to set up and automate most of, just using a couple of like conditional recipes. So that's the core skill stuff. There's obviously a lot to do there. The secondary skills, these are on the list of things that I need to get better at and cultivate, but not at the expense of core skills, which is, I've definitely been guilty of spending too much time on these things to the detriment of C# and Unity development. So these items are 3D modeling, working with images, basically just for textures and for UVs, working with sound and music and video creation. So these are all things that I want to do, and I think they all tie into my VR business in varying degrees. But almost everything that I can do now, I can get 3D modeling and textures on the asset store or all over the internet. Anything that I'm going to do as a subcontractor could involve working with an artist as needed. So I don't really need to, I really shouldn't be spending a lot of time working in 3D modeling right now. I shouldn't be making my own textures, and I definitely need to step back from like trying to make my own music and sound effects.
Unless you're going to use the Dave sound effects.
Yes, I definitely am. So those are almost like the secondary skills category are almost a to-don't list. Like, these are great things to do later.
Yeah.
Solve the cash flow issue first. So not after, but kind of in conjunction with the portfolio process, I want to get one of those things done. So maybe spend a week or so on the bowling project. And then there are a couple of developers that I want to tap and just see if one of them will give me or sell me an hour or two of their time for basically an interview, a developer assessment, not to hire me to work at their company, but basically to go through the same process of like take a look at my demo and help me understand what I don't know and what I need to learn from that, and just kind of help me understand where I am in terms of skills development in this market. Because I'm definitely at that point where I just don't know. I don't know where I am. Like, I've talked to several other Unity developers at the co-working space, and how to put this diplomatically, everybody seems to be kind of making it up as they go along. There are varying degrees of expertise, but whenever I ask somebody a question, I've been in software development long enough to know when somebody is just kind of making it up as they go, as opposed to drawing from a deep wealth of knowledge. So yeah, I just haven't been able to get a good sense of where I am in relation to other developers. So I think that developer assessment is going to be a pretty crucial thing to just kind of putting me in my place and developing some confidence and kind of informing what I need to learn and really focus on. So all of this, pretty much everything we've talked about so far, needs to happen within the next couple of weeks. And then while I'm doing that, I need to start finding other opportunities to fix the cash flow issue. And that could be working with other local developers here, going to other VR meetups, other tech meetups, trying to meet people, just finding the opportunities. That could also turn into checking out the freelance websites, the whole online gig economy, trying to find some of that stuff. Also, I think Unity's got kind of a job board type thing. So maybe trying to get a presence there. And then, then we get into the last resort category of FileMaker subcontracting or get a job, things like that. So I guess that's pretty much it. I think we touched on the main things that I wanted to kind of get out of my head into your head.
Thanks.
Into the podcast head.
Something that's you've undoubtedly thought about, but I wanted to verbalize, is literally from like today is then kind of changing the way you introduce yourself.
Hmm.
You know, I am Joe Simpson. I am a contract Unity and VR developer.
Yeah,
The fact
I
that
have
you have not
actually.
previously had a contract is irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, I even had something in my notes that I really need to stop thinking of myself as like a student of this, and I'm a full time VR developer. This is what I do, as opposed to yeah, I mean, learning a lot of the stuff on the side. Check it out. Like, no, I need
Yeah.
to stop thinking that way.
It's not even somebody goes, well, do you have a portfolio? And it's not even, well, I'm just getting started. It's, well, this is a new business for me, and I'm
Hmm.
working on putting together the portfolio pieces that I can share with the public,
Yeah,
which is totally different from, no, I don't actually have any portfolio pieces.
yeah, definitely.
um it's there's a line between presenting yourself as the thing that you are building and bald face lying,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
avoid the second one, but you can still be the first one.
Yeah, and this kind of goes along with the fake it till you make it thing. But if I get myself into a contract where I'm over my head, that customer is going to benefit immensely because I have a tendency to always deliver on what I sell people.
Uh-huh.
And I've done that in a number of projects. I'm like, sure, this is over my pay grade or past my skills, but I'm going to gain the skills for this project, and you're going to end up with something far better than what you thought you were going to get. And I've done that in my own company as well as previous employers. I'm like, especially at my first FileMaker job, there were several projects of like, I don't know if we can do this, but we're going to try, and Joe's going to be the developer, and we'll see. And like lots of, kind of warnings to the customer of like, this may not go the way you want. And every one of those projects ended up extraordinarily well. And because I'm willing to put in the time to gain the expertise. Like when I've got a specific objective and I can form constraints around that objective, that's the type of environment I can thrive in. And, and I've spent the last year in the opposite environment of like, I have no constraints. I'm just going to learn everything. And it doesn't work out that well for me.
Well, it doesn't help that everything is a humongous problem in knowledge space.
Yeah, I mean, like I can solve those. I can close those gaps pretty quickly. Like if I were able to come up with a game idea, tell you the game idea, and then wipe my memory of it, and then you make me do that, I'd have these things done by now. But it's that I don't know. I get stuck on something on my own, and there's just not that external expectation to finish it. Like nobody's relying on me to do it. As opposed to when somebody is relying on me, or when, particularly the way that I've always done my consulting company is people pay me up front. So I'm on the hook for that money. Right.
Right.
I've already taken the money, and I'm on the hook for it. And so I'd better deliver. And, this goes back to the Joe that studied philosophy for a lot of years. As a result of that, I've developed a certain level of integrity where I don't want to be the type of person who doesn't live up to what I tell people. So I always try to exceed that. And maybe that sounds a little bit arrogant or self-conceited, but that's the kind of person that I would rather be, rather than someone who doesn't deliver or apologizes.
Yeah, I don't know about arrogant. It's a model for living. It's
Mm-hmm.
just one model.
Yeah.
It's the model that I prefer.
Yeah.
There are people out there who prefer other models.
Yeah. And it's an ideal. It's not something I can always live up to, but it's something that I strive to live up to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's most of what I wanted to talk about. I guess in terms of like getting demos out there and publishing, obviously I'm going to be focusing mostly around Steam VR, but I wanted to touch on Daydream and Windows Mixed Reality as well. And then I thought about, I need to look into the specifics, but I thought about any of those like packaged builds see if I can publish them on itch.io under a free or pay what you want model if anybody wants to support me in that stuff. As opposed to like trying to publish a completed project under Steam, itch.io is much more of a indie friendly experimental store, rather than like junking up Steam with like, here's a half-hour demo that nobody asked for.
Yeah.
So I guess all in all, what do you think about my midlife crisis of 2018? Mid-developer crisis.
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of work, and even now, all of those projects are functionally self-defined, and so you're going to have to continue to watch for kind of feature creep.
Yeah, definitely.
I would very specifically spec out exactly what you want to do for version 0.1 of your bowling game. Because we already talked about, 3, 4, 5, maybe half a dozen different little tricks. And you're going to want to bound that.
I think a combination of speccing it out in advance as well as giving myself a hard limit on hours. Like, you could spend 25 hours on this thing, and that's it.
Yep.
Okay. After that, you're publishing it. So kind of a combination of those two things would probably help me get that shipped. And I think that's one of the most crucial things that I'm lacking so far in this space is just I've never shipped anything. Nothing is out there.
Right.
I've done I've started half of many projects and they're all just sitting dead in a folder. I need to get something out there, even if it's just a tech demo of like, wow, that was really stupid. You shouldn't have made that. That's still better than what I've got now.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta publish in whatever form. It's got to get out there.
Yep.
It is probably the most common trap that I have seen from 20 years floating around the periphery of game development is a tendency towards putting together a cool little thing and then losing interest in it and moving on to the next thing. Like that's the trap that gets probably 99% of people who could do game development.
Yeah.
Is the inability to actually finish a thing and release it. And I don't think I'm off by that 99. I may have missed a 9. Like, it may be 99. There's a lot of people who download Unity, run a tutorial, start playing on a thing, and then just kind of work on a second thing or spin off in some other direction. What was the real artist's ship?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Joe needs to ship. And not get bogged down in everything else. The 3D modeling, I'm going to make 360 videos. I'm going to start working with Magic Leap. I'm going to start AR. I'm going to start AI development.
How many different VR headsets can I support? Step 1, support one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think targeting Steam VR is the best because with very little work, you just kind of by default support all of them. Which may not be the most graceful way to support Oculus with the touch controllers, but yeah, that's later. Getting something on the Steam that says, HTC Vive supports parentheses Windows, MR, and Oculus at your own risk. That seems to be how it's going right now. So yeah, that's my big topic of the day, my big impromptu podcast, and my new master plan. So I know it sounds pretty disorganized right now, and it kind of is, but I think having this conversation helped me flesh out some of the stuff I need to spend more time thinking about. And then, I don't know, I just need to get this podcast out there and get a blog up and running and just kind of make people aware of me, because I'm a pretty smart person and people should know about me. And then see what I can do to help other people in this space as I go. I think that's what I've been lacking so far. Everything has been kind of internally motivated, so I haven't really been doing anything for anybody else. And that is kind of that's holding me back in a big way. It's weird. My own selfishness has been my downfall.
Now that I've considered it a little further, you were talking about your primary learning objectives, and one of them was becoming really, really good at C#. And I would consider shifting that one down to maybe a 1.5 or a category 2. Because almost everything that I've seen so far is like, unless you're doing tools development, so far I haven't seen a lot that required really advanced C# to be able to move forward.
Okay.
I think you're going to gain a lot more from being able to use the Unity tools than you will for being able to write really good C# code. Now, being able to write really good C# code might get you into other contracts that are not game development, but that's not what you're interested in.
Yeah. Well, no, for the record, I'm definitely interested in all the other contracts that aren't game development.
Okay.
That as long as they're doing things in Unity/VR, I'm totally open for and excited about the VR experiences market, doing stuff in just other industries that have nothing to do with games.
Gotcha.
I think I could get a ton of experience that way. Like, I would love to, this will probably turn into one of my portfolio pieces sometime, but I would love to do a bunch of historical recreations. I am a huge history nerd. I don't know if we've talked about that on the podcast, but I've read way too many books over the last 10 years about Greek and Roman history, really interested in Persian history, and I just want to go to some of those places in VR. And there's been a couple of VR tour apps, and I've seen how impactful they can be. Like, I was just in Machu Picchu last night. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, but I was there in VR, and then I saw a picture of it today. I'm like, I've been there. Like, it wasn't that I had been there in the VR. I'm like, that's someplace that I've been now. I have a memory of being there, even though it was still just Joe in a headset in his office. And I want to make that type of thing. That's probably going to be the toughest thing to build a company off of, because there's just never been a ton of money in those types of educational things, and that money tends to be spent less than wisely, in my experience. Some people would rather spend millions of dollars on grant money on a single thing than a little bit of money on a highly skilled developer. I found that out the hard way from my other consulting business. Like, yep, I've lost contracts to huge developers who haven't delivered on what they said they were going to 2 years later.
Yeah, I know developers who can work well within the educational space. It's one of those particularly tough ones because of the weirdness of the way the budget cycles work and things like that. Then again, technically, I had some success in the educational market in a couple of spots. So, yeah.
It's an uphill battle at this point. It's not on the top of my list for that reason. But being able to, I would love to recreate Cicero's villa, or one of his many villas, I should say. Just some of the less popular scenes from history, but well known in literature, or also recreate some imaginary scenes from famous novels and things like that. I think would be really cool. I mean, there are tons of really great stuff out there that's in the public domain that I could, stuff that's written in the 18th or 19th century that is very familiar to basically a nerdy audience that I could recreate in VR. And not entire worlds, but a sliver of that world could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, in the short term, you're likely to only be able to get that stuff if you can find somebody else who's already got the contract and join their team and help on it. Just because the one thing that I noticed, if nothing else, on the big educational projects like that is either you are making them long before you're going to get paid for them because you have to have the finished product to be able to sell it.
Yeah.
Or you have a long sales cycle at the beginning to get the money to pay for it, and you don't have that kind of time.
No. All of this is someday maybe stuff.
Yeah.
So like I said, right now it's focusing on getting some freelance work, and or I don't even care if I have to get a job in the VR industry. That'd be fine as well. I'd only want to do that with somebody that's fine with the fact that it may be a temporary job. Like if you want to hire me for a couple of years, that's great. But obviously, if they're going to do that, they'd want to know that Joe's still running a company on the side. I think. I mean, maybe I meet the right team. It's like, nope, I'm just going to work here for the rest of my life. You never know.
Yeah. Well, and to the best of my knowledge, the game development industry at large is very transient.
Yeah, I've noticed that. Just from the dozen or so people I follow on Twitter that seem to just kind of do a project with a team and then do another project with another team.
Yeah, it seems to be almost as though all game developers are contractors, whether they know it or not.
Yeah.
And you come in, you work on a project, and then very likely when the project is over, you're gone. So I wouldn't worry about that side of it so much. Like, that's a conversation you can have once you're 80% of the way through an interview process. I also know, in general, most of the game developers that I've heard of, almost every single one of them is working on their own game on the side.
Yeah. Which I kind of am, but more of just working on a business on the side at this point.
Well, but the way you characterize that is, I'm working on a game on the side.
I'm working on history on the side.
Well, sure. Well, then you're working on an experience on the side. But that's always, I mean, that's kind of, seems to be the way the industry goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was an opportunity that I had, 20 years ago. It was like 2 months after I'd started my own business. I had basically one customer, 1.5 customers. And I was talking to a guy that I knew from college who was working for a small educational games publisher that was cash rich. Basically, they made small, like, shareware sorts of things. A $15 or $20 game, and they're shipping out floppy disks. But they had 3 people on staff whose entire job was sitting down there taking in orders, processing orders, and shipping out packages.
Wow. 3
full-time people shipping these things out. This was, again, it's 20 years ago. Like, there wasn't a lot of internet distribution and things like that. And they offered me a job. Just for knowing coding in general, and I was going to have to pick up the particular platform. And there's a part of me that has always seen that as the path not traveled.
Yeah.
It's one of 2 or 3 major points in my life where I made a decision that who knows what would have happened if I'd gone the other path.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a few of those. Some of them I kick myself over.
So yeah. Well, don't make this one of them.
Yeah.
Go work on a bowling game.
Cool. Any last words of wisdom before we hang up this impromptu special edition of VR Hermits?
Wisdom is a very strong word for anything that I might impart. I am generally I personally am resistant to debt.
Yeah.
I also have a built-in resistance to the concept of starting over.
I don't seem to have that.
And I don't mean like starting over on a different game, but like starting over on a different life.
Yeah, even that. Maybe we'll do another episode about that someday. But I've had a lot of starting over.
Yeah,
in the last 10 years.
And I don't mean this to push either of those perspectives, but merely to filter any of the things that I said through that. Like, there are people who would be like, no, just go get yourself a large credit card and start going. And other people who would never shift. I will shift, but it's one of the things that I constantly struggle against is my tendency to stay where I am if where I am is not catastrophically horrible. So, filter all of my advice through that in my weighting of various priorities for you.
Okay. That's good to know. Cool. So I'm going to go work on a bowling demo. I'm going to get a blog up and running to start talking about that bowling demo and anything else I do. And then get back to work as a full-time VR developer / contractor.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
There'll be a link to my website in the show notes.
If you'd like to hire Joe for any of your Unity development services.
No, I think you should rephrase that. You would like to hire Joe for your Unity development services.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool. Well, that's it for today. Thanks again for taking the time, Dave. I appreciate it.
Sure thing. Well, that's our show for today. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm VRHermit_Dave.
And I'm VRHermit_Joe. Thank you for listening.